Renegade River in Spring Lake wants to buy your used handguns and hunting guns. Renegade River, your hunting, camping, and survival store. Stop in and check out their new and used firearms, sporting goods, Army and Navy supplies, and survival gear. Downtown Spring Lake, next to the police station. Be a survivor, not a statistic. Renegade River in Spring Lake has new and used handguns, hunting guns, sporting goods, and survival gear. Protect your rights and your freedom. Ask about their CPL classes. Renegade River, next to the police station in downtown Spring Lake.
The Talk of Muskegon. News Talk 1090, WKBZ.
Welcome to the Mike Hewitt Show. My name is Mike Hewitt, and today in the studio with me is Kevin Green, who was once upon a time a state representative.
Yes, I'm a recovering politician that got back in the race.
There you are.
Yes.
Okay, so now you term limited out as a state rep, right?
Yeah, in 2010, so I served my three two-year terms.
Is that 73rd district?
The 77th district.
77?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Wyoming and Byron.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you, is which one it was.
Yeah, the city of Wyoming and Byron Township.
Okay.
About 90,000 residents.
A lot of door knocking?
Over my years, I've probably knocked on 40,000 doors, so I wore out a few pair of shoes.
Yeah, that is some serious, I've done it before, and it can be a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work. I don't think folks realize what politicians have to go through to be politicians, and I'm not whining, I'm just saying folks don't realize how much work it is.
You know, it's actually a lot of fun. My feet still hurt, obviously, but people are very friendly in general.
Okay. But you're a candidate now for state senate.
I am, and looking forward to it. It encompasses my former district of Wyoming and Byron.
So you got a good portion of the people already know you.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. I represented them well, both as a state rep and also a city council member for 5 years.
Well, I'd forgotten that.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
yes.
were on the city council.
So I
there.
got to know them very well.
Okay, very, very cool. Let's, if we can, just to give some foundation, when you were in the House, what committees were you on?
I focused primarily on healthcare issues. I
Okay.
was a vice chair of senior health issues. I was on the health committee policy committee. I also was had a chance to be one of the few members to get on the appropriations committee with the Department of Community Health.
Your background is real estate and business, isn't it?
It is, and I made a decision that I wanted to diversify myself and really dive into accessibility and healthcare costs.
Okay, I was trying to connect the dots because it seems to me like I think you served with Barb Vanderveen at least for a term.
I did, yeah, my first term I did.
Yep, now, and she is a registered nurse, and so she was on probably that same committee.
She was my chairperson when I served my first term in office when we were in the majority, which was a much better feeling than the last 4 years when we were in the minority party.
I was going to say, you had an opportunity to field both of those two worlds, majority and minority.
Yeah, you get a lot more done when you're in the majority.
I hear a lot from the other side that says the majority Republicans right now are hostile and block them from advancing their agenda at all. But I've heard the flip side is that that's the way the Republicans felt at the time. Is that true?
When a party has control of the majority, it really is tough for the other party to get much done. I mean, that is the struggle. So all you can do is kind of make your voice known.
Okay. If you should win, what committees are you going to be looking for?
Well, I'd really like to get on the transportation committee. In my full-time life, I work in the outdoor advertising industry, so I'm very familiar with transportation issues.
Okay.
And also really feel strongly that we need to prioritize our budget. We have a $51 billion budget, and here we can't have the money to fix the roads. It's kind of ridiculous. So
I never could get my head around the idea that we could have that large of a budget while our population shrinks. I don't know how our social needs keep growing with our population in decline.
Well, a big reason for that is our exponentially growing healthcare costs.
Okay.
Medicaid is almost $13 billion of our budget.
One of the things I wanted to talk about with you today, because I knew you had the health background serving in the House, Medicaid expansion. I always affectionately refer to it as the Medicaid explosion. When I look at Medicaid, and maybe I'm all wet, you're certainly a lot more experienced on this topic than I am, but when I look at the healthcare cost increase, and I look at what we've done with Medicaid since its inception in 1965, I tie the outrageous increase in healthcare to Medicaid. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the math is historically on the side of that argument. So when I look at what Governor O'Snyder did, as I affectionately call him, and some of the folks that voted with him in the Democrats on the Medicaid explosion, I got to tell you, I don't get it. To me, it's an unfunded mandate. At the end of the Obama promise, we know that the dough that he's depending on is going to come to an end. I don't know how you tell all those folks that you've put on for free, now you can't have it anymore. So it's not like some tuition issue in some small college somewhere. This is statewide, and we're putting what will turn out to be hundreds of thousands of people, and at some point the dough's going to be gone. And so they're going to be looking to the state population that are working to say, you need to pony up because we got to keep this ship going.
Well, we simply can't afford it. The enticement for some of the legislators to vote yes on it was that the federal government was going to pay for it, but they're only going to pay for it for the next 3 years. So in 3 years, we're in a whole world of trouble. The healthcare expenses on our budget, it's over a third of our budget is the Department of Community Health. And it's just out of control. When I was serving in office, we had 1 in 7 people on Medicaid.
Right.
Now it's close to 1 to 6, and it's going to approach 1 in 5 people on Medicaid, which is just, it's unsustainable.
But these are government decisions that are it's like the great experiment gone wrong. These are government decisions that are impacting society. And I often use myself as an example here. I was born with a heart defect, and I've done fairly well in my life. I've had great times in financial and times when I was right on my can, but I did it my way, hating to quote Elvis Presley here. It was me. It was all those decisions, good and bad, were me. But early in my life, the state tried to get me on that path of Social Security, disability, and state aid, etc. And I ponder when I look at myself and my 4 daughters, what would our life have turned out like if we would have allowed ourselves to get stuck in the easier trap? And I say easier trap respectfully to those people who have made it, because they make it really enticing, but it's a trap.
Well, we have to get back to our basics, which is living within our means and taking personal responsibility for our lives. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree with you. What would you? There's probably always going to be a push to unwrap the Michigan Medicaid explosion. If you win in the Senate, are you going to make a move to do that? What's your campaign's position on the pushback of that?
Well, a lot of this has to do with Obamacare, and one of the things I've been researching is Article 5 in the Constitution, where our state legislatures can actually call for amendment to the Constitution. Right now, the executive branch and our president has way too much power, and we really need to get back to what the Constitution wanted. So even as a state legislator, I can make a difference by pushing for this convention.
But first off, I thoroughly agree with that and support it. But for me, when I look at the greater picture, I think partly the reason that we're into this are programs like No Child Left Behind and now Common Core, meaning those decisions that have restricted or taken away the decision making from local parents and from local government bodies like the school board, frankly. Now the school board is making lofty decisions on what to do with the booster money rather than what to do with education within their school districts, and I find that alarming. But the more we've dragged choices, in my view at least, the more we've dragged those choices away from parents and school boards, the less result we've found. And so I've often cited, there's an SAT score result, and it shows people that were born in 1952 and what their SAT scores were on average, all the way through to people born in 1992. And Kevin, it was every single year without fail, it went down, not up, and it didn't even plateau. Every single year the SAT scoring got worse. And I stand back and go, really, we're voting for more of that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's got out of control. I'm a big proponent of local control. As a city council member, I never lost my roots when I went to Lansing, and was always very frustrated when they cut revenue sharing for our roads or public safety. And I also obviously supported our local school districts with the school board. That's one thing I hear all too often is even state intrusion into local school boards. We have one of the highest standards in the state already.
Right.
So we really don't need the federal government to be big brother and tell us what to do. the intent supposedly is to make sure that every degree is the same in every state, but at the same time, you know, our government wasn't set up to be one big federal government. You know, and then with everything going on with the federal government, I surely don't necessarily know if I trust them to decide what our curriculum is for the state. So
No, I don't. And the other side of it is that on us, we can't ignore culture, okay? When we're making these educational choices for a nation as big as America with, what, 330 million plus or minus people, it's not possible to say that the same needs, educational needs of Shreveport, Louisiana, mirror Whitehall, Michigan. That doesn't add up to make it for anyone that could possibly believe that it's the same educational needs. But what we end up with when we look at the math again, you take Michigan, last I saw the math, 25% of those that graduated from high school will graduate from college. And folks have heard me say this probably too much, but you've got a curriculum that's well into the 95% range of college preparatory courses. And I pause and go, well, why are we doing that? Who's going to be the electricians and the plumbers, and who's going to have those jobs? And so I look to places like Career Line Tech Center and say, what can we do with that? Can we make it stronger? And I don't want to say water the other one down, but return public schools to the local school, as you pointed out, and then do something greater.
well, we have it really figured out well in Kent County. The Kent ISDs have some great vocational programs. So they have our young adults have a lot of choices,
Okay.
but other counties don't have those choices, and so I think it's important that we need all sorts of people to run our society.
You probably know Jeff Hansen, Senator Hansen.
I do. Yes,
He
I was
wa-
Jeff's seatmate for my first term.
Okay, then you'll appreciate that. He was on this show a few months ago, and we had a similar conversation talking about Career Line Tech Center, and he told me I was speaking. You're thinking the old way. That's just not true anymore. And I have to tell you candidly, here's my belief, and you can tell me if I'm all wet, because again, you're probably more in touch with it than I am. Jeff Hansen certainly thought I was all wet. And when I look at Career Line Tech
But I
Center,
don't always agree with my seatmate.
and listen, you may or I might be wrong. I'm being very candid when
the
I
whole
say that.
world has gone to a new level of technology.
It
So I
is.
think that's what's crucial, is that we need to embrace the 21st century. And
Well, when I talk to the instructors at Career Line Tech Centers, a couple different counties, okay, and when I talk to them, they express frustration that they're used as a dumping ground for children that are not necessarily academically minded, or kids at a school, alternative education programs that are using them as a dumping ground. And listen, I think that's just kind of some wrong-headed thinking in my mind. Now, Jeff disagreed with me, and in my retort to him, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit, and I apologize, but what I believe happens is when he or other legislators go out to those places, they get the senator walk. Okay, so you walk down the halls and you look at, we got this great curriculum. It does this and this and this and this. But I say, listen, as a guy that used to employ a handful of, I've hired a lot of people in my career, and those 2-year certificates are not necessarily taken with the meat, with the consideration and the red blood meat that they could, if we developed a different way of actually looking at what students were putting in those classes, rather than just, I see you don't want to you're not going to go to college, obviously, so how about if let's just put you over here in the cafeteria area. Well, who's going to, you can't make a life family supporting career out of some of what they're teaching. And again, they're shifting, it's a counseling issue is where I'm getting at, but they're shifting the wrong people into theirs. I believe that now. Am I all wet?
well, I think the 2 points where we need to talk about is getting the job providers involved in the process, because we need to get the employers to have the skill sets that they need to compete in our world economy. So whether that's somebody going to be our next electrician or our next engineer, they're all equally valuable, but we need to give them the proper skill sets. This is still America. I think we all should be able to choose our career paths. We don't want to guide everybody in the same field, because then we'll be in big trouble. Not to mention, we want our young adults to have the choices.
Right.
We need to let them decide what they want to do. But I think the bigger problem is early education. We have a little bit of a dilemma in Michigan of getting a lot of our 3 to 5-year-olds in school. I have a 4 and 5-year-old. My daughter goes to a Montessori program in Rockford, and my son is in developmental kindergarten. And so they get all the advantages because I'm willing to prioritize and spend my money to do that with them. But there's a lot of families that can't afford to do that. So that's the early ages is when brain development occurs. And if we don't give our children the ability to compete with their classmates, that's where we really do them a disservice.
What happens to the economically challenged families that are not in a position to do what you have just talked that you can do? And by the way, I congratulate you on that. But when I think of some folks that are not in a position to do that, but they're stuck with a 90-some% curriculum aimed towards college prep when their child may or may not be heading in that direction, but they're a little bit locked in that. I mean, certainly you have school choice, so you can move one over, but you're not being able to take your funding with you. And I'm talking about school vouchers or whatever we want to call it, with whatever the latest politically correct name is. What is your thoughts on that?
Well, that's the whole point. We need to provide for early education. So
Okay.
within our budget, we have a huge K-12 fund. We need to do a pre-K-12 is really what we need to do.
Okay.
And focus a lot more of our energy in the early years so that they can be successful.
Okay, we're going to go to a break, but just to give you a little heads up, when we come back, I'm going to ask you some questions about DECA and higher education costs, because frankly, I salute DECA. I am really concerned with what's going on with our higher education cost of tuition, etc. Folks, we'll be right back.
This is News Talk 1090 WKBZ.
Welcome back to the Mike Hewitt Show. We are in the studio today with Kevin Green. We're on education a little bit, and we're going to just a couple more things on that, and then we'll pivot in a different direction. First off, DECA. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but reading from their website, DECA, preparing emerging leaders and entrepreneurs in marketing, finance, hospitality. Let me tell you, the reason I'm aware of this program is my youngest daughter went through it. They sent her on trips where she got to meet a lot of corporations, and she's still in high school at the time, and taught her the kind of tools that she needed to have in her box. And this is not a shot at counselors in high school, so don't take it that way, but it was far more valuable for her to actually be sitting there with someone who's going to be doing the hiring later in life. Then she goes, wow, I need to know this and this and this, not that and that and that. What do you think about that kind of bridge?
Well, all too often, they teach some of the old standards that we grew up with even, and the joke is, well, how is this applicable to real life?
Right.
Which they need to really start looking at the curriculum and go, is this going to help in the workplace? Part of the early childhood, going back to that, is teaching our kids the love of learning.
Right.
And one thing that we've lost by setting all these standards up, and the teachers teach to the test, and it's very frustrating for our educators, that we need to give them a little more flexibility in creating students that know how to problem solve, that have some creativity. The new employers today don't even necessarily need to know that you can do X, Y, and Z. They need to know that you can think through a problem.
Yeah, I used to say when I did a lot of hiring that before I could teach them the job I hired them for, I had to teach them how to learn, literally.
Right.
Because they were really great if you wanted them to memorize something on Friday, but not so much if you wanted them to actually understand it and be able to apply it.
Right. And having those initiative-taking skills is another thing.
Years ago, I bought a house on the other side of the state, and it was an old house, and frankly, it had been owned by a hoarder. And part of my deal when I bought it was I had to clean it out. So we got one of the big, gigantic, semi, whatever you call them, box set out in the yard. And we hauled all of this stuff out and finally got it all out. And it was, I'll never forget this. It was Christmas night. All the kids had their presents and they're off scurried off in their rooms looking at all the Christmas presents they'd gotten. And I thought, I'd never really gotten to the attic. I think I'm going to go up to the attic and look around up there. And there was some miscellaneous stuff, roller skates from the 30s and an old dollhouse. But I came upon a box of books. Important to the story, this was Christmas Day, 1996. And in the box of books, I found 3 academic books. that were from parents to their child, and it had been given to her on Christmas Day, 1896, exactly 100 years before I found them. In the book, there was a rose from back then that had been pressed in it, but there was a typical message from parents to a daughter: congratulations, you're on your teaching career, and here's your books. They were 8th grade reader, writer, and arithmetic. Okay, and I got to tell you, to this moment, I'm 53 now, I'd be hard pressed to complete all of the tests in those 3 books. And I do okay on most of the topics that we work with in our society, but I don't think that I could really successfully pass the 8th grade we always hear our great-grandfather only made it to. And I find that a little bit concerning, that in our approach to get a hold of this rounded education, we kind of cut out the stuff we need that used to go in the middle of this rounded education donut they've given us. What do you think?
Well, I can hear what you're saying, but at the same time, we're in a new world, and embracing science, technology, and math, along with making sure the kids have, our young adults and our children have the love of the passion for learning, and giving them the problem-solving skills that we need, and allowing them to do extracurricular that gives them that well-roundedness. Part of our budget is we have corrections, and that's a $2 billion budget. The higher education budget is only $1.8 billion. So here we fund our prison system more than we do our correction system, and more than we do for higher education. If that gives us any indication of that we're not prioritizing properly.
Yeah, but first off, I agree with that. But when I look at funding for higher education, when I actually drill into the numbers a little bit, and I've certainly talked about this enough on this show, but since 1980 forward, there's been an 800% increase in the cost of tuition. And so that's, in other words, it's times 5 versus the average income is times 2 during that period of time. And I think to myself, I have a tough time getting my head around. I think it's raw greed, by the way. I'm not one of those class envy people, but in fact, not at all. I rail against that politics. However, when I look at the top 16 executives of the University of Michigan, and they're making on average $1 million a year, and the average person cannot afford higher education, and when they do attempt to afford it, they walk away with an entire mortgage. Think about that for a minute. The cost of tuition is now equal to the average cost of a mortgage, or the average dollar value of a mortgage. Mm-hmm. Something's wrong with us that we're allowing that to come to pass, and part of it goes to what you were just saying, is why I keyed up on this issue. One of the things I learned with my interviews with Arlen Meekoff and with Jeff Hansen is that our Constitution says we shall fund higher education, but it doesn't allow for us to have any kind of decision-making role in education.
That's a big part of the challenge I was going to say, is that we
then
can't micromanage.
But it means that we have some discretion on how much we fund them.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can't have any control over what they're going to do with their dollars, like paying each other $1 million and slapping each other on the back,
mm-hmm.
why the average person can't afford schooling, these things are just morally reprehensible,
mm-hmm.
in my view.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Am I nuts again here on this issue?
No. It tends to be an elite class in the sense that the benefits are better, the pay is better. I'm not saying we shouldn't pay them properly, but it's out of hand. It's out of hand. When the rest of the world has a defined contribution and they get defined benefit, it's time to change.
But when I look at the results,
time to be competitive.
To be competitive is the key, because when I look at, we're all talking about global market,
Mm-hmm.
but when I look at where we're at on the global measure of education, our funding is in the tip top and our results are sliding quickly. We're nowhere near the top 10 now. We're in retreat while costs go up.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Those things, Kevin, make no sense to me.
It's out of hand. One of my best friends, in fact, he was my campaign manager a few years back. He just got his doctorate.
Okay.
And he owes over $120,000 in debt and can't get a job.
Yeah.
So it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous how much money he spent, and then is not able to find employment.
Yeah, but then some examples, and anyone that knows anyone that goes to college that's honest can give some examples.
Mm-hmm.
Brother-in-law of mine, who was a police officer in Pontiac, wanted to become a lawyer, so he had to add on to the college he'd already gotten. Some of the electives, he got to pick between Introduction to China. I thought, Introduction to China? He wants to be a lawyer in Oakland County. What does that have to do with it? Another friend of mine, he got two majors in his first 4 years. One was mathematics, the other was computer science. So we're obviously not talking about a lightweight. He also took bowling 101 and bowling 1, and you go, what? Where are they coming up with this nonsensical stuff? When you start dialing back and looking at the curriculums that they're charging and demanding that you take, you get to it's an elective. You pick from one of these 5 nonsensical, idiotic, absolutely worthless courses, and then you pay a times 8 and 9 for what they're actually worth. And as a society, to me, it's like healthcare. We're running around trying to say, how can we pay for this college that is off the tracks? How can we pay for an average cost of an individual Motrin tablet for an overnight stay is $9? And as a society, we're asking how to pay for it, rather than saying, you know what, we're not paying for it. Because if you take all of the administration
putting
off
our
of,
foot down.
we're insane to do it, Gavin. When you look at a hospital and say, let's absolutely shelve their entire administration and ask the question of can they still operate, and the answer is yes, which tells me I don't want to pay for them. But it goes to market. So when I look at legislation, if you win, you're going to hear me constantly saying, Kevin, promote competitiveness, promote America.
Absolutely. We got to get back to our basics about free markets and competition and limited government. I mean, that's what it boils down to. So every decision I'll make as a, if I'm blessed enough to earn people's votes is going back to basics and looking at those. And every bill that you look at, seeing does it meet that requirement? Are we actually limiting the scope of government? Are we encouraging entrepreneurship? I couldn't agree with you more, Mike.
Let's segue a little bit. A couple cultural things I want to run by you, just for the sake of people getting to know you, so it's outside of the normal genre. And the first question, actually, I think divides both the left and the right pretty evenly on the topic, and it's the topic of freedom of speech, as it relates to, in this case, everyone's probably sick of hearing the Don Sterling deal. But there seems to be two schools of thought in this, and they're on both sides of the aisle, pretty evenly divided. So I'm interested in knowing your take on it. One half of the populace seems to think that the idea that what he said behind his doors is anybody's business or should impact him negatively is scary. The other side says what he said was reprehensible and he needs to be punished. Where are you at on that equation?
Well, what he said is reprehensible, but at the same time, I believe that we need to have some privacies on this earth, and I think everybody's allowed to be as angry as they want. That's part of the free speech.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so I mean, I don't think we can or would want to stop people getting very upset about that issue.
I don't want to stop them. I agree. Yep, I agree with that. Either of them, by the way. When I look back at my own life, and that's the pain I try to look through the other prism, I'm trying to see this question with for me. I've been through a divorce, said probably lots of ugly things I'd just as soon not have, and I think that's true of everybody. Everybody in their life has been in some kind of debate behind closed doors.
Oh, absolutely.
That they'd go, holy moly, did you really just put that on the entire world population for people to critique and destroy my career over? All the people that are throwing stones at this guy, and I'm not defending because I don't agree with him.
Right.
But all the people, and I don't mean some of them, every single one of them throwing stones at him have said things that are reprehensible that they just as soon not share with the world.
Well, I really believe in God's grace for all of us, and I've made definitely my share of mistakes. Probably one of my worst moments ever got caught on video when I got a drunk driving about 5 years ago, and I was set up to probably be the next leader of the House, so I really paid my price by not getting that. The embarrassment was crazy with the media.
Think about it. I could have been interviewing the Speaker of the House right now.
I know. I really messed up.
But the difference is I like you, and I don't really care for the current Speaker of the House. So.
well, thank you. Well, and people were very gracious. In my district, I probably had 95% of the communication was, "We still love you, and we forgive you, and you're a human being," and obviously I feel horrible about that. I would never make the same mistake by getting in the car after drinking. But I also made some good decisions. I did pull off to the side the road after I knew I had too much.
Listen,
but the point is, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Here I'm running again. People say, "Hey, are you crazy?" I'm like, no, I'm a human being, and I think people are ready to embrace that I am just a normal man, and I can admit to fault, and people are ready for some transparency, I guess.
When I was reading the articles on that story, I probably had the same mindscape that you just identified. I'm going, Kevin, what are you thinking? But then when I got into it a little bit deeper, because medias can be very harsh, as you know, and once you get past the paragraph that they start off with, where they're kicking the dog, and you get into the nuts and the bolts, and so wait a minute, the guy's on the side of the road. And if he were drunk driving and knew that he shouldn't be driving and he pulled over on the side of the road, I mean, somehow we've been able to extract common sense out of a lot of these issues. So on one hand, it isn't for me to forgive or nothing, but I'm not taking that approach. But I'm saying I think that once you found that you were in that circumstance, you made the right decision.
Yeah, I feel good about that, and
Yeah.
I've been embracing that. I've been able to share my story in the hopes of preventing someone else from doing this. Because the reality is somebody could get hurt if you do that, and people do get hurt.
Yes.
And so if I can be a model, if I can, because of my incident, it actually gets people to think twice. I think it's a wonderful blessing.
Right.
That occurred, if no other reason. But at the same time, people are all about forgiveness. I mean, there's nobody on this planet that hasn't had their share of struggles. I think I can really relate to people a lot better because of that incident.
Years ago, I've got 60 seconds, I'll tell you a real short story. Years and years and years ago, I was in my young 20s, was out with some police officers after hours drinking. Drove home, got to where I was probably too drunk and definitely too tired, so I'm going to fall asleep at the wheel and hurt somebody. I pulled over. Cop pulled up behind me. Where have you been drinking at? And I tell him out in the back of the parking lot of some police department. This is years and years ago. This is in this new world we're in now. He said, I'm going to come back in an hour, and your butt better be still sitting exactly where I'm finding you.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning he made a judgment call that I realized I wasn't where I should be. That's why I was pulled over. We can't make those judgment calls anymore.
It could happen to anybody, but hopefully this will be a testament to don't do it.
Listen,
don't do it. That's my advice to anybody.
We're going to go on a break, and when we come back, I want to talk about what your legislative agenda will be. Folks, we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Mike Hewitt Show. I'm here with Kevin Green. Kevin, when we a couple more just little dinky issues, and then I want to move to the last little bit about your legislative agenda should you win. The first is that you probably don't know this, but I own a gun shop. So I'd be really, really remiss if I didn't ask you where are you at on gun rights.
Well, if it gives you any idea, I grew up in the Upper Peninsula.
Okay.
So
they have a couple guns up there.
They just a few up there, yes.
The
So,
ATF agent tells me it's like the wild, wild west up there.
yeah. So I'm all about the rights to bear arms, and I think when they start tampering with that right, that's just a mortal sin, I think. So.
Right. When I look at my own self, I've got a handful of just issues that are just top me right off. I believe I'm thoroughly convinced that we can't save America unless we save the American family, and as you're probably aware by now, health and education, to me, are the second and the third step of that three-step measure. But I ask you that question, or I'm posing it that way to give you an idea of what I'm getting at. What are your hot button issues? What are the things that you just that you're passionate about?
Well, I am a single father of a 4 and 5 year old. Just recently went through a divorce, which was very painful, as everyone can attest to that's been through that. So I really believe that getting fathers involved in their children's lives is crucial.
Right.
It's absolutely crucial, whether you're married, divorced, anything. And it's really one of the big issues that is troubling America. Is the fathers are not getting involved in their children's lives.
We had a guest on a couple times now, but it's been a long time. His name is George Moss. He's actually a professor from Flint. And one of the things that in the show that him and I shared together here was he went over the statistics of suicide, crime, murder, rape, all that, and where they're coming from single parent families.
Mhm.
So in other words, we have a tendency, I think, as a society to say, okay, crime's happening in the black community, crime's happening in this community or that community. But when you take the single parent issue out of it, and then look at all of the math is flat, it's all about the same, regardless of location or gender or
Has nothing to do with
race or anything.
ethnicity.
So to your point, we've got to get our hands around how we're dealing with mom and dad in the case of divorce, which is well over 50% now.
Yeah, absolutely. And a good majority of the time, the woman gets custody of the children.
Right.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing. I really believe, ideally, in a most ideal world, you try to have as much equal parenting time as possible.
Right.
Now, obviously, every situation is different. But more importantly is making sure that the father and the mother are a big part of a child's life.
Yeah, when I went through the same thing. I was in fact, I've been on both sides of that, as the parent with visitation rights, and then following that as the custodial parent.
Yeah, so you've been the whole spectrum, it sounds like.
It is, and I'll tell you about that. The thing is, for me, is the way we're handling divorce as a society. You know, court systems in America are adversarial. They're supposed to be adversarial. Now it's that way by design. But I don't think our founders were thinking in terms of how do we handle a passionate, heated circumstance for divorce. Because no matter whether you're the one that wants it or don't want it doesn't matter. It's really deeply personal and painful. And then we put it into an adversarial circumstance. And I don't know that the outcome is to the benefit of the children. So one of the first political things I was involved in was an organization called Voices for the Children of Divorce.
Okay.
And during that
Fantastic.
era, I would tell parents, I don't give a hoot about your drama or your drama or
right.
what she did and what he said. I don't care. What are we doing with the kids? And I'm thoroughly convinced, as much as George Moss even more entrenched me in this, that kids absolutely need both parents in their world.
Yes, they do.
And I don't know that the
couldn't-
courts are helping us arrive at that as a solution.
They can make it difficult. They can really make it difficult. So, one thing I would like to do as a state senator is work with Friend of Court and make sure that they're doing this with the right goals in mind. Sometimes I think they just are a big collection agency and they get focused on doing what bureaucrats do, I guess.
Yeah.
But they really need to try to encourage the right kind of relationship with the children, with the parents.
I wish the courts would look at equal custody first as the first answer and not the second answer or the last answer. Again, because I don't have an agenda. It isn't pro daddy, it isn't pro mommy, it's pro kitty. And I think that's the first best. Now, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes, for whatever reason, it can't be that way, and I understand that. But to me, it should be the first and not the last.
Yeah, when I was in my first term in office, a legislator named Leslie Mortimer introduced that legislation, and I supported that. Ideally, because of the sensitivity with men and women, the legislation should come from a female in office, because then it was about, and her issue was that she didn't get a chance to see her dad
Right.
as much as she wanted.
Right.
So it was easy for her to promote that. So,
Absolutely.
but I definitely would support that.
Okay. Tell me this. I will take some time. Tell me what you want to do when you win.
Well, I really believe in a citizen legislature. Again, I've got a young family that I need to provide for. I think one of the lessons I learned as being a state legislator was that you can totally get engrossed in that culture. And so I really believe that we need to go there, vote on the legislation, get input from the stakeholders, from the people that you're affecting, and then come back home, and even have another job.
Are you advocating part-time legislation?
I am, yes.
Okay.
It's taken me a while to embrace that. Because I always used to think to myself, here, I'm working 80 hours a week. I mean, what are they talking about, a part-time legislature? But what people need to realize is that then you need to respect that the legislator will be going to their place of work and voting and researching the legislation, and not going to every single event and shaking hands. But if they're okay with that, I try to be extremely accessible. I give my cell phone number to everyone.
Sure.
Because I do want input, but then they can't necessarily expect you to go to every one of their chicken dinners, I guess. So.
Have we reached a time yet where, and this idea came from Dave Agemer, by the way, and it was just a statement he offered along on the course of a greater topic at the time, but he had suggested that we may be at a technological time where state legislators could be sitting in their home study, or frankly nowadays at a restaurant on an iPad and cast their votes, rather than having to go to Lansing to sit there and do that. What's your thinking on that?
I guess you'd have to be a little careful with that. I mean, it's a federal offense to have anybody actually hit one of your voting buttons.
Okay.
Because you can imagine, if somebody got a hold of that wasn't your elected official, that would pretty much compromise our Constitution. But I know with the new technology, I suppose you could do some kind of eye scan or
Sure.
something like that, like 007. But I guess the benefit to that, especially in Congress, so the federal government, that would probably be better, because then their congressmen could actually be in the district. Right now, they're in Washington D.C. quite a bit. But for the state legislature, I don't think that's necessary. I mean, here I'm only an hour away from Lansing. Most legislators are an hour away or less.
Yeah,
There's a few people in the Upper Peninsula that would be a wonderful thing, obviously.
Well, you may have probably picked up on, I tend to be a little bit of a Jeffersonian, and
Yes.
and
Just slightly.
just a little bit. I have a tough time hiding it, no matter what I do.
Yes.
But when I look at the culture in Lansing and use the word culture, and it kind of popped up with this thought in my mind, but that thinks it's a good idea to sponsor 1,000 bills a year.
Mm-hmm.
I think, what are we thinking?
It's insane. I voted on, in my 6 years in office, I voted on 5,400 pieces of legislation.
I think
And-
that's insane.
Yeah,
I
and
really
I
do.
had a 97% voting record, which means I made 97% of the votes. The two times that I missed quite a few votes is when we lost our first daughter, Skylar, in a stillbirth. And when I was in the hospital, and it was just so funny, everybody's picking, where are you? Why aren't you voting? Well, I'm with my family.
Right.
I think you want us to do that.
Yeah.
But it is an insane number of bills. You asked me what's my legislative priority. I definitely am appalled that here we control, the Republicans control both sides of the Senate and the House and the governor's chair, and they can't even get the roads taken care of. We have a $51 billion budget, and we can't find a way to fix our potholes.
See,
So that's a common sense. I mean, we have between the third and the fifth highest gas taxes
Right.
of any of the states, and it boils down to that we do not use the 6% sales tax that we collect on gases to go to our roads. Just about every other state in our country does that. I mean, that in itself would fix that problem. I mean, it's an easy solution. The difficult part is what the money that they're spending on those programs, where do they either get the money or where do they cut the programs? But at the same time, our citizens expect that the money they pay for gas is at least gas and gas taxes at least go to the roads. So
to me, it makes sense.
it's
I look at the
pretty
math,
common sense.
to your point, third and fifth in terms of taxation, but we're
Mhm.
36th on the income list.
Mhm. Right,
And,
right,
and,
right.
and as an electorate, we're allowing this to happen?
Well, not to mention we're like one of the highest payers of insurance,
Right.
car insurance.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a double whammy.
Yeah, no fault places the blame on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So you're all at fault and you got to pay more.
Yeah.
That's what no fault, that's how it translates.
So to get back to the 5,400 pieces of legislation in 6 years, I think all too often legislators want to go there and maybe prove themselves. Hey, I gotta sponsor a bill or to make myself look good, and I think we just need to fix the laws that we already have. Like, let's either fix them, get rid of them. I think if I focus all my energies on just looking at regulation that's unneeded, I've been meeting with hundreds and hundreds of business owners, and they're just fed up. They're fed
Right.
up with unnecessary regulations.
Yeah, it's pretty overwhelming. As a business owner, I can tell you. Now my issues probably are more local. I've got a village and a township that with two boards of do-gooders, I say respectfully, thinking of different ways they can find local tax and local regulation.
Well,
Wow, really?
I talk about ridiculousness. I remember and I can't remember which legislator, but one of my colleagues on the opposite side of the aisle proposed regulating the number of bathrooms at construction sites.
Right.
Like like really, like, I mean, there was a lot of obviously jokes about that. I won't mention some of those, but you know, I mean, it's totally out of hand. That needs to be determined by the employer.
Well, you've got a
employee.
culture that measures a success by how many bills you can sponsor or shepherd into fruition.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how you measure success. It's how much can you build the incomes in the treasury of the citizens that sent you to represent. To me,
yes,
how can I
absolutely.
make our population more successful?
Yeah.
Not how many names I can stick how many bills I can stick my name
Right,
on.
sponsor, co-sponsor.
Just crazy upside down thinking.
Yeah.
Tell me this in our last minute or so. How can someone find your campaign? How do they get in touch with Kevin Green?
Well, I may be a bit corny, but I'm a green light for you, so that's my slogan.
Okay.
So my website is greenlight, L-I-G-H-T, and then FORYOU .com.
Green light for you.
Yep, and my cell number is 616-745-5277. I've been making lots and lots of phone calls. I've had that phone number forever, so I won't change it when I get in office. And
It's the same one you had when I talked to you like 8 years
It
ago.
is, so you can hold me accountable, Mike.
Good.
But you know, I think that's a big part of my campaign is just being a down-to-earth guy, you know, listening to people's concerns and then trying to help them.
I think, Oscar, he must have heard me say I'm going to get him back later and say, this is what you said. Why did you...
Yeah, you're not recording this, are you?
No. Very, very nice. Listen, I'm glad you came on the show today.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for inviting
Oscar,
me.
we got 60 seconds, 30 seconds? Any final comments?
Well, you know, I really hope to earn my citizens' vote. I represented Wyoming and Byron for almost 12 years. Now I'm working to meet the people of Granville, the city of Walker, all the townships in the north end of Kent County,
Right?
mostly by personal contact or by phone. It's such a big district.
It is a big district.
So, you know, I hope even through this interview people realize that, you know, I'm just a normal guy with, you know, normal struggles, and I can understand and empathize with the residents and business owners out
Very
there.
nice. Kevin, as the campaign goes on, we'll get you back on.
Great.
And folks, we'll see you next week. Thank you very much.
Brought to you by Renegade River.